So excited to see everyone here tonight. My name is Margot Lemaster. I oversee the the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion work for the Northwest Arkansas Council under Engage in WA. And we were very grateful to receive a grant from the Walton Family Foundation to be able to activate Shine a Light here in Northwest Arkansas for the first year. And really grateful to the support from Walton Family Foundation for that. And also the incredible support and partnership from everyone involved at the national level around Shine a Light. And then our local partners here, Temple Shalom, the University of Arkansas, and then the USC Shoah Foundation. So excited to have all of you here. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to my colleague Monica Kumar, who will be facilitating this conversation. Also, a huge thank you to our panelists for being here and having this really important conversation with the Northwest Arkansas community. So with that, I'll pass it on to you, Monica.
Thank you so much, Margot. We are just thrilled to be here this evening. And like Margot said, this is the first year we're partnering with Shine a Light, which is a national initiative to shine a light on anti-Semitism. And we're hoping that this will not be the last. We want this to be a growing movement. So we don't see this as, as something that we want to just do a one and done. We want to make sure that we're starting this and continuing it through the year and then supporting it next year. So thank you so much to Rachel and the team there, because it has been really wonderful to partner with you and get a sense of what this initiative can look like across the country. And with that, I wanted to really thank and then ask our wonderful panelists to introduce themselves. We have Toby Klein this evening. We have Leslie Culp and Stanley Rest, and we're going to have we're really looking to have a conversation and a discussion and really engage everybody in the room, but I'd love for them to give short intros. And then I have some questions that I'm going to kind of start the discussion off with. And then we're really excited to hear from the audience and, because they have a lot of expertise and I'm sure you'll have lots of questions for them. So yeah, Toby, do you want to just kick off and give us a short intro?
Hi everyone, my name is Toby. I am a PhD student in public policy with a specialization in social justice. I study Holocaust education. I am an openly Jewish, openly LGBTQ person who does advocacy in those areas, and I'm really flattered and humbled to be here. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Stanley, you're next on my squares.
Hi, I'm Stanley, past president of Temple Shalom. Retired clinical psychologist, excited to be here.
Thank you so much, Stanley. Leslie, would love for you to share, and thank you so much for being here this evening.
Sure, it's my honor to be here this evening. Leslie Culp. I'm all the way in Los Angeles, so it's kind of early for me still. The sun is just setting. I work at USC Shoah Foundation as the education director of outreach and education. Have been in the classroom for 22 years prior to my joining USC Shoah Foundation, and have been an avid user of testimony and conversations around the lessons of the Holocaust for students at the English language arts classrooms. So excited to be here and to join and to have those engage in these conversations. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. So I want to dig right in, and I want to start because I want to start with just open to the three of you to share in however you want to and speak to. But I'd love for you to just give us your perspective of what is anti-Semitism, and more importantly, how is it showing up in our communities today? Why is it relevant to us? And why should we be having this conversation? Toby, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. So I think first, it's really important that for those who may not know, that we contextualize what being Jewish in this area is. So when you talk about this area, the state of Arkansas, there's an estimated 2,000 Jews in the whole state. And so what I explain to my students when I teach is that means that you can put the entire Jewish population in the state of Arkansas inside Razorback Stadium 32 times over, right? That can, when we talk about an intersectionality and the things that we study from sometimes the more academic or more abstract lens, what that means is there's fewer Jews. And so there's a fear of what it means to be Jewish in public, of these kinds of discussions. So when we're talking about anti-Semitism, we're talking about a really, really small population here. And it manifests in a lot of different ways. It manifests in students being called oven dodgers on campus in a casual setting. It manifests in student groups coming over to the one Jewish table on campus, and I speak to campus because I'm a graduate student, when there are 57 religious organizations at one event. It's a religious fair, right? There's two that are not Christian, and one of them is Jewish. And when three groups come over and try to convert the Jews while they are there to try and educate, that's a form of disrespect. That's a form of anti-Semitism when you're actively trying to tell someone their identity is not welcome and valid. So I'll stop rambling there, but someone else feel free to jump in.
Thank you. Stanley?
I wrote 2 letters this morning, and I'm going to read them both. November 29th, 2022. Dear Mrs. Nelson, I knew you must have meant well, but I was puzzled by your actions back in that early spring day in 1956. As a Chicago resident, you were most likely aware that the composition of neighborhoods was ever changing. It is as if various ethnic groups chased each other around the city and its suburbs. Edward C. Delano Public School on the west side was most likely nearly all Jewish when my older sister Marilyn, 6 years my senior, began in 1946. By the time I was in your 4th grade class, Jewish flight to the north side and northern suburbs was in full swing. That morning, you asked the 7 remaining Jewish students to stand and told the class, look at them. You can see that they are not any different from you. As I looked at my mostly dark-haired fellow Yids, I thought to myself, we're no different. Why are we standing and the rest of the kids are still in their seats? What motivated you, Mrs. Nelson, to make this request? Was there some anti-Semitic incident at school that I was unaware of? Did our principal, Dr. Shutter, ask all the teachers to do the same? Or did something occur in your private life to make you want to prevent religious prejudice? It was a harmless act, I believe, but one I've remembered all my life. Sincerely, your former pupil, Stanley Risk. November 29th, 2022. Dear Marvin Marty, I tried to look for you online a few months ago, but was unsuccessful. I tried to look up Aaron Greika, and I found him. I learned that he was born in Germany, attended Northwestern University, and died in 1987 in Palm Springs at age 40. I am not a physically aggressive man and have avoided combat for the most part on the very few occasions that presented itself to me in my youth. I haven't always stuck up for the underdog either. But Marvin, the one time I stood up to bullying and to anti-Semitism was in 7th grade at Delano when you were picking on Aaron by calling him a Jew bunny and possibly intimidating physically, although my memory of the latter is hazy. I've never heard the term Jew bunny before you uttered it on several occasions, and I've never heard it since. Even though you never called me a Jew bunny, I knew it was directed at me and all my people. So at one moment, my rage erupted. I challenged you to a fight on the playground after school. Word spread like wildfire, and when we faced one another, we were encircled by a throng of curious or maybe bloodthirsty compatriots. You were taller than me. You were bigger than me, much bigger. You immediately got me in a bear hug. I couldn't move. Luckily, one of the teachers came to break up the fight, but the fight was already over. I felt proud of myself for standing up to you. I don't think I felt humiliated by being on the losing end. I remember one other interaction with you weeks or months later. We were crossing guards and got to wear white belts with a strap across our chest when we were on duty. One day we were picked to walk an ill student home. There was no animosity between us. Some questions remain. Did someone tell you the name Jew Bunny, or did you create it yourself? My son Ryan thought it might be a derivation of the racist slur Jungle Bunny. Were your parents anti-Semitic? Did your anti-Semitism increase over your lifetime or lessen? Do you remember that time when the Jews stood up? Sincerely, Stanley.
Thank you so much, Stanley. I just feel honored, and I'm sure everybody in the room does, that you shared such a personal experience and story. And I think it's brought a lot of weight to the conversation, and it's also made it very real. So I really, really appreciate you being so vulnerable and sharing. And that probably brings me to asking Toby and Leslie, would you mind sharing some personal examples, or how you've experienced anti-Semitism, or how friends and family have, because I think that Stanley has opened a gateway for a really deep conversation.
Sure, Toby, I don't know if I'll go ahead and just jump in really quickly. I think you posed a really powerful question just in the opening. Monica, I think as I think about, like, how do we define anti-Semitism? And often we talk about anti-Semitism recognized as the oldest hate, right? And the way we look at it here also is it's a genocidal hate, and we know that that's a fact, and that is something that we guard against. And instances of contemporary anti-Semitism, as we have seen, I think there's like 34% across the United States in anti-Semitic incidents, that these acutely impact individuals who identify as Jewish, both emotionally, physical safety, psychologically, intellectually. It impacts individuals in that space acutely, and it also affects society as a whole, or students. It shapes what students believe, and how they are progressing and understanding the world around them, and the jokes that they make, the social media, the kinds of, my daughter often shares with me, she knows the work that I do and is also empowered by it, and shares with me some of the social media content that comes across her feeds, or where are very like just the tropes that are used are very like their typical anti-Semitic rhetoric, and having those conversations and discussions. So I know that whether kids know it or not, and I think often kids don't realize that there's a term for what they're doing with anti-Semitism and what that means. Educating them is important. My personal experience working with USC Shoah Foundation, where we hold the largest repository of testimony of survivors of the Holocaust who speak about anti-Semitism in their time and continuing on, and even contemporary anti-Semitism. As a representative of the Institute, I myself have experienced, and it took me a while to actually sit down and understand what I had experienced as a representative of the Institute. I was doing and this is amongst my colleagues, like educators, that I was doing a presentation for, and understanding that educators are looking for, and rightly so, are looking for representation of resources for their students. And I was presenting, actually, I was using a clip of testimony, as I might share with you later on, of one of our most favorite, often used clip of testimony, a gentleman by the name of Kurt Messerschmidt, who talks about Kristallnacht. And it's a powerful clip about his experience with, he himself was an upstander, the bystanders, the victims, and the perpetrators. And so it's a really powerful clip. And in the years that I've always presented, it had always been well received. In this particular space, one of our participants paused the session and asked me why I was centering white voices. And not understanding this concept of what I was presenting and who I was presenting for, and the conversation behind that. So in that moment, and we had to pause the conversation, and we went astray, and it was an important moment for us to pause and have a conversation about what she believed and what I was trying to put forward, and how I was trying to make the connections around what students are feeling, what students are understanding, and then understanding what educators don't understand either, and the connections that they need to make. And so it was there was much more involved in it, but it really highlighted for me the importance of teacher education and having them interrogate their understanding of what anti-Semitism is and how it comes across, and how it can impact what they're doing in the classroom.
Yeah, and I'll add on with that. I was just jotting down some notes. Unfortunately, I've had some more direct experiences with anti-Semitism. First one being at a sleepover. So the top 5 kind of incidents. When I was at a sleepover and the family encouraged me, and the family said we were just going to go on an outing, and it turns out that they were trying to baptize me, and so that was the parents and the kids' plan. And I had to call my mom crying and asking her to come pick me up. That time that I had a swastika drawn on my door when I was an undergrad, and they said it was vandalism because hate crime laws didn't really exist in that state, largely in a similar context that we have here in Arkansas. And so that was vandalism. It was having my information, my address, my email address, my cell phone number, periodically leaked on sites like Parler and 4chan, these considered alt-right spaces, white supremacy spaces, largely saying this is where the queer Jew lives, or this is the queer Jew. It's having things mailed in my mailbox. It's having something, the word kike that I had to look up. I hate to use that word, but it's a word that was told to me, to my face, and left in a message in my mailbox by someone anonymous. It is instances of folks either trying to forcibly convert someone against their will. That's a form of anti-Semitism. Even if you think you're trying to save someone, it's really, really concerning and really, really problematic. So a few of those instances. And in addition to the things that I've heard my students called, oven dodger is not an okay thing to call a student. And similar to to add on to what Leslie was saying about our teachers and our professors, they care for information. Studies show overwhelmingly they want access to resources and information so that they don't say things like my well-intentioned, let's say, professor, my first year of grad school, who after I missed a day for Rosh Hashanah said, explain to the class your special day and why you had to miss class. And I said, well, why I had to miss class? He said, you and your people, you always get those special days. What is it about you that gets to break through? And so it ultimately became less of a learning moment and more of an interrogation of someone based on perceived attributes, right? So these things manifest in a lot of different ways. Those are some experiences I've had.
Thank you, Toby and Leslie. Yeah, thank you for just being really open and vulnerable and sharing some really personal trauma, because it sounds horrific and traumatic. And I can hear in your voices where you can just feel it and remember it, and that really resonates for me. So thank you for sharing that. I had a question that I was going to ask, but I think I'm going to move it to the end and kind of ask each of you to share a little bit. And Toby, I might start with you. Can you share a little bit about, because I don't know how well known the timeline to get to the recent Holocaust education bill is, or even how people understand it and what it looks like in Arkansas, or even that people know that this is a whole new thing. Like, I almost feel like people think that we've always been going to school and learning about the Holocaust. So I know that this is like your area of expertise, and would love to hear you share if you're okay with that.
Oh yeah, I'm certainly by no means an expert in it, but I am spending a minute with it for my dissertation, so I appreciate that. Again, I think context is everything, right? Arkansas has the lowest voter turnout rate in the nation, depending on the rankings you're looking at. But of the eligible voter population, we're looking at really, really low rates of voter turnout. We're also looking at a state legislature that operates once every 2 years. Some of us are under the impression that our state legislature meets every year. They don't. They meet every 2 years. It's a short legislative session. And during that time, they have record numbers of bills that they pass, more so than than our neighboring states. So we're talking about a small group of people who are ultimately voting and contributing to that, to the political system or to the policy system. And I think that's important first and foremost, right? We know things about disenfranchisement, those kinds of things that not ignore, but that are contextually important. So this bill understood that process of a 2-year timeline, understood the process, the conception of the bill, understood the process that we're going to need coalition partners. I really want to stress that. When this idea first started in 2018 with a Holocaust survivor by the name of Peter Konstam, who currently lives in Florida, He was neighbors with Anne Frank. Happy to connect anyone. He's a phenomenal friend of mine. And Peter connected with Barry Brown at the university, who was at his congregation in Florida. Barry Brown, a professor emeritus at the University of Arkansas, who one day who heard what Peter had wanted to do, connected with his friend at the gym. And then that friend happened to be the coach of a former baseball player at the University of Arkansas, who is now State Senator Bart Hester, who is the president of the Arkansas State Senate. And he was the one who introduced this legislation. So sorry, long backstory there, but a 2-year process ultimately culminating in a lot of coalition partners. And I want to highlight the coalition partners. Groups like the Northwest Arkansas Council, like the Northwest Arkansas Council gave letters of support to these two legislators to say, once this bill arrived, once it was introduced, we want this to pass, and we want this to pass really easily. And it did, largely thanks to support from Muslim communities, the local Hindu communities. We had churches write letters of support. We had a grassroots collective movement that ultimately resulted in us having a bill that is pretty simple. It defines the Holocaust. It says we need to teach it in 5th through 12th grades. And it says that it's required, that it's starting in the 2022-2023 year. So this year is when it's starting. There is not funding behind it. There is not enforcement behind it, but, and this is the and, I guess I should say, and yet it is an opportunity because Arkansas students ranked last in the nation in their knowledge of the Holocaust, according to that Claims Conference survey. And so we have a ways to go. And it's important that we have something in our law, in our legislative system that says it's important that we teach this. Even if it's a value statement, it's incredibly important that we have that. So thank you.
Thank you so much. That was incredibly thorough and also really accessible, really, just really helpful. I'm so glad we're recording this because I want to share this with everyone that's not on the call. That was so wonderful. Thank you. Really, really appreciate that. I just wanted, can you just follow up a little bit, Toby, for us, because then I want to segue to Leslie a little bit. What is this bill going to mean for our students in classrooms and in the education system? And I know you started touching on that, but can you put a little bit of meat there for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Arkansas Department of Education right now is working on curriculum to roll out to the state. So there is a requirement for it to be taught. Now, implementation is a tricky other category, is something else trickier. But it means that students should be able to expect that between 5th and 12th grade, as an Arkansas student in a public education system, you should expect to learn about the Holocaust in a way that fosters an understanding of diversity, in a way that fosters an understanding of dialogue. If you are a student who does not feel like you are being educated in that way, then that is a violation of that policy, of that state policy. And so we don't want to have our students we're not asking our students to be watchdogs or anything like that. Our teachers are hardworking and overworked in so many ways. And also we want our students to be able to expect that Arkansas educational standard. Arkansas educational standard excellence. It is likely going to be on a school district by school district basis. Now, many school districts have already been teaching about the Holocaust. This just states that there's a requirement at the very least that they do so. So stay tuned for how that's going to actually manifest with our state.
Thank you. That was just really helpful, Toby, and I feel like it segues really well. Leslie, would love to hear from you. I know that the K-12 sort of how teachers and educators approach and teach about the Holocaust in their classrooms is something that you're thinking about supporting, providing resources for. Can you give us some, and I know it's a lot, but can you give us just a sense of what that's looked like in some places where it's worked well and what resources might be available for some of our educators and students that they might be able to tap into?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Toby, for sharing the surveys that are out about the knowledge that students are reporting. We also did a survey of over 2,000 students, college level students, to understand how they had, if they had Holocaust education and the impact that it had had on them. And what we learned from that survey is that students who had Holocaust education reported having a greater knowledge about the Holocaust, which is, at the core, just being able to have that knowledge and it's understanding the importance of it in history. We also found that students with Holocaust education have a more pluralistic attitude towards others and towards a perspective of viewpoints and the importance of differing viewpoints being another key component. And the third finding was also that there was a greater willingness to challenge intolerant behaviors in others. So individuals who engage in Holocaust education, these are key. And then one of our biggest findings, especially to the work that we do, is that students learned about the Holocaust through survivor testimony, that they show higher critical thinking skills and greater sense of social responsibility and civic efficacy. Right. So the importance of Holocaust education, when obviously that first one, understanding what Holocaust was and being able to recite dates and information around just basic knowledge, like a timeline, but the learnings and the takeaways for that critical thinking and that humanistic perspective and that perspective and even perspectives, just understanding the importance of countering intolerance became key. And that's in studying Holocaust education, of course, and taking a look at contemporary anti-Semitism and the way in which that relates and connects and extends from beyond prior to the Holocaust, post-Holocaust, and what that means is another key learning that we try to gather resources for and make available to educators. And so at the other end, Toby, you were mentioning how they've got this great mandate and everyone's got to do it, but there's no funding, right? And so how is it that teachers can approach that? And so what our institute does, what we do is we provide all of these resources at no cost to educators. There's a lot of funding a lot of fundraising that we do to keep it that way. So I will share with you some of our sites that we have available. And we have two. The USC Shoah Foundation, our educational website is Eyewitness, and I'll put that in the chat here in a second, where all of these resources are available for educators. And this is testimony based, but we also have primary sources are key for us as well, and how to contextualize the primary sources and secondary sources and putting them in a way that makes it accessible for that K through 12. Our majority of our content currently is middle school and high school, and we are starting to develop more and more for the lower grades and upper primary as well. You mentioned that the mandate is for 5th through 12th. So we do have content that starts in different ways, and also understanding that educators enter this space in different ways, right? They also have their own passion and their own artistry about how they teach. And some of them might bring it in with films, and we know films are an important aspect of education, an educational resource. And so we also, pardon me, that's my alarm saying I have to get to class, but there is a how to teach film with testimony to contextualize this understanding and understanding the difference between something that is a film and fictionalized, and then something that is a primary source and like a documentary. And so we have a variety of entry points for educators and for students to help meet the needs. And everything that we do is also stems from standards, because we know educators are going to bring things into the classroom, and that their priority is to teach students skills, a variety of skills, reading, writing, thinking, listening, speaking, that we also bring in and develop our content in such a way that it meets those standards as well, so that when teachers are doing this, they're not just meeting this one mandate, as they might see, like I'm just doing this, but they're hitting various outputs that are required of them in meaningful ways. And then, of course, at the other end, that the universality of story is key, and the way in which students can have these conversations in a meaningful way, so that it's not just something that happened long ago or that happened to somebody else, but that it's something that they can connect to and resonate with them on their own for current days. So some of our content, I'm going to drop this in the share. Let's see if I've got so many things open. Give me a second. I can maybe share. I'll share the link, and then I'll also share maybe online, if that's okay. Would it be okay if I shared? Okay, wonderful. Let's see if I can get it.
That would be wonderful. I think Margot will give you screen share.
think she gave it to me, so we're
Oh,
good.
wonderful. Thank you, Margot.
So we have one in particular that I'm sharing here is Encountering Anti-Semitism. So we have our testimonies that we have available in Eyewitness, which is available for educators. It's about 4,000 testimonies available for just for free access. We have over 55,000, and that's accessible through universities in a different way. But we bring in those educational, really powerhouse testimonies into Eyewitness, and then we develop. So that's a lot of content just by themselves. So we also develop pathways for individuals to be able to come in and explore the content that we have available. We have one in particular. I know that Shine a Light, one of our key concerns here is to countering anti-Semitism. So I wanted to feature this concept here, where we've gathered information about, like here, providing students with a definition. And it's something, and I'll provide you with a couple other resources as well. And it gives you a little bit of background. Here we also have countering anti-Semitism added to the Nickelodeon So this is for parents, so even younger kids, right? Second, third grade, like through books and through stories, and that we provide content for them as well. So this is available for the younger audience and for at-home conversations. And then for our older students, we have an activity. This is an Eyewitness activity, and of course we have professional development to talk about how to use these and how to bring them into the classroom, but they're all pretty straightforward. And as a classroom teacher myself, I love these activities because when they're built by teachers and educators, they're piloted, and so we know they work. And they're the perfect lesson plan. You can assign it to a student, and you can manage get a sense for how they're working through the progress, and pause and have conversations. It's like a built-in PowerPoint. So you can use it in a variety of ways, depending as a teacher, how you want to bring it into the classroom. But different grade levels, this is a video editing activity about what is anti-Semitism. So students explore it, and they get to explore some of the archive as well to find their own understanding of what anti-Semitism is. Another focus on contemporary anti-Semitism, more specific, and some examples of what happened in 2016 in oh gosh, it's escaped me for a second. In Denmark, the attacks in Denmark, and so we feature that conversation, and then we also have something on countering extremism and anti-Semitism in contemporary society. And here we have an individual who has turned from being an extremist, part of a KKK or a hate group, a white supremacy group, and he has conversations with Holocaust survivors and changes him. And so we bring these resources and make them available to teachers and students to be able to engage in these conversations in a variety of time frames, and depending on what the educator has time for as well. So those are like the quick. In fact, let me drop this into the chat quickly if I can get to the chat. Here we go. For people to be able to access them, and that's a direct link to our resources. We also have our other resource that we have available, and I would highly recommend, especially for teachers who are new to this content. We have our partners at Echoes and Reflections, who has 11 units on teaching about the Holocaust, a different aspect of the Holocaust. And then there's one that's specific to learning about contemporary anti-Semitism. And as you can see here, it's all testimony based as well. So they're one of our partners, and we help build the content with them. And we're also partners with Yad Vashem and ADL, and that's who makes Echoes and Reflections. So it's a really powerful resource that these are just lesson plans with connected clips of testimonies. If I can show it over here, you can see here on the side, that are connected for the conversation and discussion and the bringing in the humanity of what we're talking about for students. And again, accessible at no cost for educators, and really well written, and they work really well. So I'll also drop this link in as well for everyone to have access to. Again, I mean, there's so much that I can share with you, but let me know. I'll pause here and see if there are any questions or if there's interest of me showing anything else.
I actually had a question about these resources. like I saw, it goes over like anti-Semitism and how it comes from the Holocaust and other things as well. But does it also talk about like how the Holocaust has affected the Roma population as well?
Yes, we do. We have various activities that are specific to understanding that particular experience. In contemporary, I think we have a couple. So we are global. We have global content. I know that we had a couple of activities that were specific to the Czech Republic, who were encountering those issues and trying to figure out how, and it actually became very political. But we do have testimonies from, I think, 3 Roma Sinti individual survivors. And we do have a couple of activities that are specific to that experience.
Thank you. Yeah, that was my question.
Thank you, Costa. You actually perfectly segued into the next piece where I was just going to open it up for questions. So thank you for preempting that. I have a little, I want to circle back on something, but this would be a wonderful time if you have any questions to ask our panelists, or just have, just share your thoughts. You don't have to have a question. I would love to hear from anyone in the room. Stanley, would love to hear from you if you have anything to add before people start sharing.
Well, let me say one thing. I'm very impressed with both Leslie and Toby's knowledge of resources. Just looking at the screen share is just amazing how incredibly developed it is, just looking at a fraction of it. And I want to emphasize that, and I think Castor's question about the Romas is indicative that, in a way, all prejudice is linked, and all groups that are victims of prejudice suffer not equally, but in various ways. And it's ironic that historically, some of the minority groups have animosity towards one another. So I was really impressed by Toby's comment that the Muslim community in Arkansas was very helpful in the education bill, because I think focusing on anti-Semitism is very important, but also linking it to the greater issue of othering, and which goes on all the time. And so I'm impressed, and like many people, I'm alarmed about what's occurred in this country and around the world just in the last few years. That things are ramping up, of course.
Can you all see my screen, if I may? So I'm not sure if we're all familiar, and I can drop this in the, I can drop a link to this as well, but the language of the bill, just so that we're clear, because it was written intentionally to be fairly straightforward. The goal is that that teaching the Holocaust generates an understanding of the causes, course, and effects of the Holocaust, that we develop a dialogue with students on the ramifications of bullying, bigotry, stereotyping, and discrimination, and so that it encourages tolerance of diversity and reverence for human dignity for all citizens in a pluralistic society. So that language is pretty clear of what the goal of this bill is. It also goes on to define what the Holocaust is, because we are now having fun conversations about what is truth, who gets to define truth. These have been ongoing conversations for a while, but they're a little bit more public now. And so things like this enshrine what our understanding of the Holocaust is. Now, this definition does not specifically name other groups. We can have a larger conversation about why that was felt necessary to pass the Arkansas State Legislature. And also, this is what the bill is, and we hope that there will be no need for it to be strengthened in the future, but knowing that that's also a possibility, of course, to engage with. But this is what the bill is in its entirety.
Thank you so much, Toby, and thank you so much, Stanley, for uplifting solidarity, because that is really that is so key to this work, and being in solidarity and working together, and working against and dismantling dehumanizing is something that we all need to work together to do. So I appreciate that. Before we kind of wrap up, and I wanted to share I wanted to ask the panelists a question as we sort of wrapped up. Does anyone else have any comments, or does anyone else have any questions? I don't want to miss anyone. I want to make sure everyone feels heard.
I just want to introduce myself if I can. I'm Erin Cohen, co-president of Temple Shalom. My co-president, Melissa Woods, couldn't be here tonight, but I just want to thank you for doing this panel, and Toby and Stanley, thank you. And Leslie, nice to meet you. Monica, nice to meet you as well. And I could echo, I grew up in Arkansas as one of 4 Jews in a small town. And I can echo what, I think I might be the only one at this particular panel, this particular group that actually grew up in a very tiny town here in the Bible Belt as a Jew. And I just want to be a resource to people. Temple Shalom is a resource, and I would like to be a resource, and I just want to thank you.
Thank you so much, Erin. Really, really appreciate it. And I've loved that you joined today. Thank you. And getting to know you, which I've been doing. Does anyone else, I want to make sure I'm not missing anybody. Does anybody else want to share anything or ask the panelists any questions? I feel like we're really excellent on time. Well, thank you, Meredith. I really appreciate it. And I've been blown away by our panel and just the people in this room. It's definitely been an experience as opposed to, being in a panel, which sounds so dry, and I hate to call it that. So thank you for this conversation and this space that you've created of community. As we wrap up, and I have a final question for our panelists, and would love to hear from everyone actually in the room. I wanted to share my experiences of Jewish culture and values. So I had a lot of Jewish friends. I grew up in London, North London, huge Jewish community, but I didn't really think about what it means to be Jewish because we were all we just all kind of intermingled and were so interconnected. And then I met my husband in London. He had just finished working in India. He built something called Indicor, which is the equivalent of AmeriCorps in India. He'd been doing that for 3 years. And as I got to know him and found out that he's, 1, the most amazing person ever on the planet, but 2, learned that his experience of why he built Indicor and why he went out to India for 3 years to serve was because he went to Brandeis and he went to the Heller School of Social Justice. Brandeis is a Jewish forward university, and it's where he truly learned. It's where he re-navigated his path from becoming a New York finance person to focusing completely on social justice, and completely curveballed his life, much to his mother's happiness. Let's say that. And I truly got to understand how Jewish values think about building community and solidarity through him. And then furthermore, when we moved to California, I joined the Jewish Community Center in downtown Palo Alto as an employee. I spent 8 years there. And when I joined, the CEO at the time, who is a dear mentor now, his name is Alan, they had just bought the land. So they had just bought land downtown Palo Alto. There was nothing there. And I kind of became his special project manager, and we literally built it from the ground up. And so again, I really got to understand what it means to build community, what it means to be Jewish, what it means to be inclusive. And then my son went to Tiana, which was the preschool right there. And so he grew up from from the age of 1.5, learning about tzedakah and learning about social justice and learning about tikkun olam. So that was his experience of being Jewish. I will also say he also learned to love challah every Friday at his Shabbat ceremony. So I think what I'm trying to ask is, that was my experience and my family's experience of Jewish culture. And our work is around, in my home, both of us work in social justice. My husband works at the culture and diversity team at Walmart. I do social justice work and belonging work in the community, 2 very different two very different experiences, but sort of the similar kind of work. And we would both say that we learn a lot of the way we do that work from our Jewish friends and Jewish community and Jewish culture. And our son has values that are ingrained in social justice that come from Jewish culture. So all of that to say, what is ways that we can move our community, share with our community about what it means to be Jewish, and what, how can we continue the conversation of what it means to be Jewish? How do we dismantle anti-Semitism in ways that are positive and inclusive and thoughtful and meaningful? Because that's the work that I think really moves people. And, certainly for my family, that it has been transformational. So I would love to hear if there was one or two things that you think people could take from this discussion and bring into their community spaces, or bring into their, open up to friends and family who maybe don't have these conversations about anti-Semitism. What would that be? And what would that look like? What would be the gateway?
So I'll jump in on this one. So for me, when I think about my experiences with Judaism, I oftentimes think about the time when I came out to my family, and folks often ask me, well, as a Jew, what was that experience like? And I hugged my lesbian rabbi like a few minutes later. I mean, it wasn't a bad experience. It was welcome. I was welcomed. I was loved. I was embraced by my family, by my religious community. And so I think when we're talking about anti-Semitism, it's important that we think about those moments of celebration, that we think about both acknowledging the pain that our Jewish neighbors may be going through, and also inviting ourselves to do a little bit of that groundwork, right? There's nothing more validating than hearing someone butcher happy Tu B'Shvat. Like they couldn't figure it out, but they wanted to wish me a happy Tu B'Shvat because they saw it on the internet and they wanted to celebrate that. And so I think finding ways to do that work on our own, right? To look something up and then say, hey, I read this, I think this makes sense. I'm trying to say happy whatever, can you help me out? That's a really important conversation starter. And I want to assume that folks are coming from a place where they want to learn more. And if we can have that communication, wonderful. And what I'll remind folks is just the last thing I'll say is, for me, Judaism has always been community. I came from a large Jewish community in Chicago, and moving to Arkansas was certainly different. There were things that I wanted to be here that felt like home that weren't here, right? When I got sick, there wasn't a deli nearby. There were thankfully Jewish mothers who came out of the woodwork to make me matzo ball soup, but there weren't things that I might consider to be comforting and home, like a bagel shop or a deli, or people that spoke a language that I was familiar with. So those kinds of instances, I think it's important that we think about those spaces to continue to create community and to support our Jewish friends and neighbors. And the last thing I'll say is, you've got one great neighbor here, Aaron Cohen, who is the co-president of Temple Shalom, who you can always reach out to. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Toby. Stanley, you wanna share any thoughts?
I'm just impressed on how some of you have been so active for so long, and it puts me to shame because I haven't been neither much of a victim, but not much of a healer. So I really want to find ways to share a sense of community with people who are in the majority community, because they have needs. Their perspectives is very valid as well. So I think I'm inspired to do something more. I have to figure out what more I can do. But thank you both. Thank you all.
I love that. Thank you, Stanley. I'm looking forward to working with you. Leslie.
I would just add in, and again, we're about testimony and the stories of individuals who have shared their stories, and the content that we have available are stories about pre-war life, which really brings into the celebration about family and culture and friends and school experiences, to understand the full human experience. And one resource that we have available, some of you may be familiar with it, is our Dimensions in Testimony. So these are our interactive biographies where you can have a conversation with a simulated conversation, right? It's in essence, it's a search engine, but you can ask as if you're having this conversation. And built within this, because this is part of our work as well, we are want to provide resources for educators that can really show the range of experiences and even that pre-war life, what that was like, and to understand that people were just people, like everybody. You had your own way of celebrating with your family and the closeness of family, the importance of friendship, the importance of food, the importance of dreams, and the legacy that gets passed on. And so within this content that we have available, we have 4 currently available on Eyewitness. Many of these resources are available in museums, but we are making them available in Eyewitness as well. One of our activities is about learning about Pinchas Scooter's pre-war life, what his life was like. And we get into cultural practices and friendships and what was important. And in understanding that, then the story of what happens to him and his family through the war also becomes that much more poignant, because now you know the individual as a human being and the impact that anti-Semitism ended up having on him and continues to becomes pretty powerful. So I would encourage that if you're working with students in sharing and understanding a broader perspective and not centering a Jewish experience only as a victim of the Holocaust, but prior to that and beyond that, I think is key and important. So I'll share a link. It is one of our most popular resources available on our site. And it's something that anybody can access. And again, it's written by educators and used in the classroom. So there are various activities, and his activities actually, if you click on learn more for Pinchas Scooter, our experience as a pre-war life, his experience through the war, and then post-war as well. It's just how do you have a conversation with him as well. So it's a powerful resource.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate it. And I feel great because we're at 6:56. I feel like we had a really rich, deep, intentional, meaningful conversation. I want to thank everybody for joining us for this experience. I'm so glad we recorded it because I'm probably going to watch it again, and I'm definitely going to share it with some people who wanted to join but couldn't. And before we go, I want to thank Margot and the council for supporting this work. And I also want to thank Rachel and Shine a Light, because without them and her, this wouldn't have been possible. She introduced, yes, absolutely, Erin, absolutely. She introduced us to Leslie, and then kind of we've been brainstorming this conversation. And so Rachel, I know you're there. Thank you so much, and thank you, Shine a Light. We're just really excited we're excited to partner. We're excited that we blossom this, and now we're really excited about how it's going to flower in the future. So thank you so much to everybody. And we will make sure that we share some of all the resources, Leslie, that you've shared. And Toby, thank you so much for your email. We really appreciate it.
And also, we hope to see you this Sunday afternoon from 2 to 4 p.m. at the Jones Center for our Celebrate Light event, where we'll have multiple faiths represented, celebrating the different ways that light is celebrated across different faiths. So,
yeah, thank you, Margot. I almost forgot about that. Good night, everybody.
Thank you so much. Good night.